All right, everyone, we start off the day with some joyful news for, most of us, which is that Feministfrequency recently apparently has gone broke. Like the donations, I guess, weren't coming in for their so-called nonprofit. So Sarkeesian's 2 employees are gone, and now it's a podcast, basically. Now, should have done that to begin with. Look, it is simply more efficient to do a voluntary style show or podcast or something like that. It is so much cheaper and easier and lets you focus on everything else, making content, branding, and doing everything that you need to do. Whereas if you have to have like staff or an accountant or something like that, it's tedious and inefficient. The cable news networks are learning this the hard way. But let me point something out first before I launch off and how happy this makes me, because, Gamergate and my bullshit. Let me just say this. Feministfrequency is a misleading title the same way as like Patriot Act or the Think of the Kids Act or something. The third waivers are not feminists in the traditionalistic sense. Feminism is the radical notion. I'm a feminist under the true definition. Men and women should be treated equal under the law, and they should not disparage, hate, or attack one another simply on the basis of gender. Makes sense to me. In fact, I don't understand why anyone would not believe in that. But then third waiverism is about nitpicking about so-called microaggressions, which don't exist, man-spreading and stuff like that. It's really non-issues, because the thing is, traditional feminism won in the Western world. Men and women are, for all civic and legal purposes, completely equal in the United States. It's always funny when claims are made of a wage gap, which does not exist. It's entirely compensated for by differential behavior within genres of work. Within work environments, women are more likely to stay home. Women are more likely to work part-time, just the way it is. Women are also less likely to have to die in a coal mine, so I don't see anyone, rambling about the lack of female coal miners. By the way, lack of females working on oil rigs. You know how much those dudes make? making quite a bit of money. Fresh out of tech school. You get your degree in engineering, go work on an oil rig somewhere, make $70K a year to start or some crazy amount like that. Man, it's not bad. Of course, you have to deal with oil all day and the vague possibility it blows up or something, but, I don't see a Sarkeesian worrying about the lack of females working on oil rigs. It's always about the lack of women in some happy job. It's not about that. Meanwhile, I believe that more and more physicians are female now, and it's a pretty high-level job. Yeah, then you start with $120K a year probably at a regular practice. Of course, you get a lot of student loan debt, so you can understand. So third waivers are about nitpicking about non-existent problems. Specifically things like not enough female characters in video games, which is like, who fucking cares, dude? There have been some games before where I preferentially choose a female character myself. Like in Fallout 3, if you chose, Lady Killer, which is if you had a male character, you had the Lady Killer perk. It was fucking worthless. You couldn't really do anything with it. But if your character was female, you could get, I think it was Black Widow, and the damage bonus it would apply was considerably higher, number one. It's not cheating, I'm just choosing something that's already in the game. And it was cool. And when you're wearing power armor, you look less like a Lego brick, in all honesty. Like in RuneScape, I think my character was female too, just to fuck with people. But I thought it was great, and it's fun. But third waivers want to ruin, just sort of the organic way of things being, which is not unkind to women. Gender roles, my gender roles and my Tumblr genders don't even coexist properly together. In some cases, it's very funny because you'll see two groups of so-called activists. One of them insists, no, gender is a binary and so women's rights. The other one's saying, no, there's like 60 genders, so what are you talking about? Which kind of woman are you talking about? There's 15 of them or something. And it's so funny. And Sarkeesian just, some of the stuff that she's done and said indicates a high support for censorship. It's not even so much, here's my big problem with some of these individuals and groups. It's not even so much she's pushing an ideological line that happens to be objectively wrong. Who fucking cares? It's still her opinion. It's her free speech to make her podcast and say, this is problematic, this is a microaggression, that behavior is so terrible. That's fine. But then when you get someone saying legislation should be made against it, we should censor, private companies should censor people, that becomes a problem. Because what we see is little groups like this are constantly trying to bombard a site like Google or Twitter or something like that to try to get them to censor users, to try to get them to crack down on third parties, to get them to scrub apps from the App Store because they're problematic and stuff like that. At that point, it verges into the realm of empowering corporate censorship, and that's something that goes beyond simply saying, hey, my microaggressions. Well, you can say that all you want, just like I can make a video here and say microaggressions do not exist. What you're considering microaggressions is a laughable concept. It was dreamed up by people who want to beat a dead horse, and so they're seeking to justify an ideology that fundamentally has already won. That is, in the absence of any actual inequality and significant mistreatment of females, in that absence, there is no reason for feminism as an ideology to really exist. It simply becomes the norm. But you have to have, because you do have some misogynists in the world, there will naturally be an offshoot on the other side. It's like one side spawns the other. I pointed this out with political movements like in the realm of Europe. The fact that you have a rise of the far left there spawns a further right. That in turn spawns more of the far left, and so you get a breaking apart of culture. We see this in the United States too. When they graph, visually, and of course they never want to show you the sources, so take it with a grain of salt, of the movement of the right and the left, generally speaking, they're splitting further and further apart. The left in particular is becoming far further left. The proportion of people that would be on the social Marxist side is growing, whereas on the right it's a little bit more tempered, but it has gone further to the right. As an aggregate, if you're talking about numbers. But groups like Sarkeesians, it's always funny when they sort of fall flat, because they don't really do anything positive for the world. It's not like you're uplifting people. If she were raising money for orphaned girls in Nigeria or something like that, or building a school for deaf girls in Saudi Arabia, that would be a valuable thing and great for the world. But that's not happening. Instead, you produce a podcast. People always claim to be advocates and activists, and then they say, "Hey, no, I'm not gonna go to where the fight is really at. I'm not gonna go over to Afghanistan and try to spread women's rights over there. I'm gonna ramble about video games." Well, that doesn't take a whole lot of effort. It's not really as brave as some people think. It's stunning and brave is the new thing. It's really rather funny. That's about all. Peace out.